$50 to take the obese daughter. Father's shameful deal. Mountain man's shocking response. $50, Samuel Brennan slurred, slamming his empty tin cup on the bar. $50 and she's yours, the fat one in the corner. Take her so I never have to look at her again. Every head near the bar turned, then turned again toward the iron stove in the far corner of the trading post, where a large woman sat hunched in a patched gray shawl, trying to disappear into the shadows. Lydia Brennan had spent a lifetime pretending she could be invisible, but at 340 pounds, there was no hiding now. Heat burned behind her eyes as the winter wind howled outside, and the men inside laughed at her father's offer. If you're listening to this, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you hearing this story from right now? Dutch, the owner of the trading post, polished a glass with slow, greedy satisfaction. $50 to take your own daughter? He drawled. You must be real desperate, Brennan. I'm beyond desperate, Samuel snapped. She eats more than my whole trap line brings in. Too big to move, too soft to work. 26 years of dead weight. I'm done. A low, ugly chuckle rolled along the bar. Lydia stared at the warped floorboards by her boots, the crackling of the stove roaring in her ears. Her fingers dug into the worn fabric of her dress, knuckles white, as Dutch leaned in, voice dropping but still loud enough to slice through the room. $50, and I'll find a man who'll take her. Got a trapper in mind, Jake Holloway. Works his people to the bone. He'll squeeze every bit of labor out of her before she drops. You pay him, she's gone. Clean, simple. Work her to death, somebody muttered. Better than feeding her till then. The laughter that followed was sharp as broken glass. Lydia's stomach twisted. Her breath came shallow and fast. It wasn't just words this time. Her father wasn't just angry or drunk. He was bargaining, trading her life away for a handful of coins and the promise of an easier winter. $50, Samuel murmured, almost to himself, rolling the number on his tongue like it tasted sweet. For peace, for freedom. Lydia rose on unsteady legs, the stool scraping the floor. No one moved aside for her as she pushed past rough shoulders and thick coats, only sneers and sidelong glances tracking her shame. She shoved through the door and into the night. The cold hit her like a fist. Wyoming winter, brutal and unforgiving. Snow crunched under her boots as she stumbled away from the trading post, tears freezing on her cheeks. Her father would sell her to be worked to death. Dutch would arrange it. Jake Holloway would finish it. Nobody would care. She was still trying to breathe, still trying to think of somewhere, anywhere, to run when she slammed into something solid. It wasn't a wall. It was a man. He didn't budge an inch. Lydia staggered back and looked up and up into a weathered face framed by fur and frost, eyes the color of winter amber, cold and sharp as a wolf's. The stranger studied her a long, silent moment. Snow swirled between them. "Watch your step," he rumbled, voice low and rough. "Storm's bad enough without you running blind." Behind them, the trading post door opened, spilling yellow light and drunken laughter into the night. Lydia's gaze flicked from that doorway back to the towering stranger in front of her. And for the first time in her life, instead of shrinking away, she reached for a stranger's eyes and whispered, "Please, I need help." Because this mountain of a man had just stepped between her and the only fate her father could imagine for her. The stranger didn't answer right away. Snow gathered in his dark hair and along the thick fur lining his shoulders as he studied Lydia in absolute stillness. He looked like a carving cut from the mountains themselves, massive, cold, immovable. "What kind of help?" he finally asked. Lydia swallowed hard. "My father. He's trying to sell me to a trapper named Holloway. Dutch at the trading post is arranging it. $50 to take me away and work me until I'm dead." Her voice cracked. "Please, I don't know where to go." The man's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind those amber eyes. Recognition, maybe anger, maybe memory. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lydia Brennan." His jaw tightened. "Samuel Brennan's girl." Lydia flinched. "Unfortunately." The man exhaled, a slow, cold breath that turned to steam in the winter air. "I know your father, and Dutch, and Holloway." His voice dropped lower, like distant thunder. "Those men have one thing in common. They don't value life unless they can profit from it." Lydia wrapped her arms around herself as a gust of wind sliced through her dress and shawl. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have bothered you. I just didn't know who else to turn to." "You did the right thing," he said simply. He turned and walked toward the trading post. Lydia hurried after him, breath misting in the air. Inside, the room froze. The giant man filled the doorway, snow blowing in around him. Dutch's greedy grin faltered. Samuel Brennan's drink paused halfway to his lips. "You," Dutch muttered. "Logan Frost." Lydia felt her breath stop. She'd heard of that name. Whispers among trappers. Stories told in low voices. Logan Frost, the winter trapper who roamed the Wind River Range. Logan Frost, the man wolves avoided. Logan Frost, who survived alone where most men froze. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Brennan!" Samuel coughed, sitting up straighter. "Logan, didn't see you there." "Didn't need to," Logan replied. "I heard you loud enough from outside." Dutch tried to laugh. "Just business talk, nothing serious." Logan ignored him completely. His gaze pinned Samuel like a knife to a cutting board. "You're looking to get rid of your daughter." Samuel shifted uncomfortably. "You heard wrong." "You were shouting it," Logan cut in. "You're trying to pay Holloway $50 to take her." Dutch stepped back slightly. He knew Logan Frost didn't bluff. "My offer's better," Logan said. "I'll take her, for nothing. She comes with me. You never see her again." Samuel blinked. "For free? Why?" "Because I need camp help," Logan said, "and because Holloway will kill her." His eyes narrowed. "And because I don't tolerate men selling their daughters like livestock." The room went dead silent. Dutch licked his lips. "What guarantee do we have you won't just dump her in the snow?" Logan's gaze snapped to him. "If I wanted someone dead, Dutch, they would be dead." He turned back to Samuel. "I'm giving you a clean way out. No payment, no questions, your choice." Samuel stared at Lydia. She held her breath. Then he said, "Take her. Draw up the papers. I don't want her coming back here ever again." Something broke inside Lydia then. Not pain, not shock, just the final collapse of whatever small hope she had once held for her father's heart. Logan said nothing. He signed the papers Dutch scrawled on a scrap of parchment. He guided Lydia to the door. For the last time, she stepped out of Fort Laramie with her father behind her. But this time, she wasn't alone. 3 days on the trail blurred into white storm and pine-shadowed silence. Logan rode ahead with heavy, unhurried steps, breaking the snowpath for her. He never complained when she slowed, never chastised her for her sighs, her breathlessness, her exhaustion. He simply adjusted his pace and kept going. Every night, he built the fire. Every morning he checked her boots, tied a warmer wrap around her shoulders before she woke. He didn't speak much, just a handful of short instructions, but his actions spoke loudly enough. Lydia had never known quiet that wasn't cruel. Silence from her father meant anger building. Silence from townspeople meant judgment brewing. But Logan's silence felt different. It felt steady, safe. On the third day, they reached a clearing tucked into the heart of the Wind River Range. A sturdy cabin, half buried in snow, waited under the shelter of tall pines. Logan stopped, lifted his pack, and said simply, "Welcome to camp." She stared at the little wooden home, smoke curling from its chimney. Her heart thudded, soft and frightened and hopeful all at once. This was no prison. It felt like the possibility of a beginning. The first full day at Logan Frost's camp began before dawn, when the world was still blue with cold and the wind whispered through the pines like distant voices. Lydia woke to the smell of wood smoke and the faint crackle of the fire he had built hours before she stirred. Snow pressed against the cabin walls, but the warmth inside held steady, as if Logan himself anchored the place against the wildness outside. She rose slowly, her joints stiff from days of travel, and stepped onto the packed floorboards. A pot simmered over the fire, broth he'd started before heading out to check the traps. She blinked, surprised at the unexpected gesture. No one had ever prepared anything for her before. When Logan returned, snow dusted his hair and shoulders like frost on a bear's pelt. He stepped inside, shutting out a blast of winter wind. "You slept," he observed. "Yes," Lydia said, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. "I'm sorry. I should have woken earlier." "You needed rest. Eat." The command was gentle in its bluntness. She obeyed. For the next week, Logan taught her the rhythm of survival, without ever raising his voice or showing impatience. His world moved with the precision of a man who had relied on his own strength for years. Each day they ventured deeper into the mountain's frozen arteries. The forest was a cathedral of towering pines and drifting silence. Snow fell in thin veils from the branches above, creating a world of whites and grays. Lydia followed in Logan's steps, her breath fogging before her face. At first she worried she slowed him down, her size, her breathlessness, her inexperience, but he said nothing. When she lagged, he waited. When she stumbled, he steadied her shoulder with one gloved hand. One morning, as they climbed a narrow slope blanketed with ice, Lydia slipped. Her foot skidded, her balance vanished, and for a terrifying heartbeat, she felt her body tipping backward toward the ravine below. But Logan was there. He caught her forearm in his iron grip and hauled her upright as easily as if she weighed nothing. Lydia gasped, clutching his coat with both hands, chest heaving. "You all right?" he asked. I didn't see the ice." "I did." She blinked up at him. "Why didn't you say something?" "I was close enough to catch you." There was nothing romantic in his tone, nothing playful. Just a simple fact said with the certainty of a man who always followed through on what he promised. Still, something warm flickered in her chest. He had expected her fall. He had stayed close enough to stop it. That afternoon, when they rested by the frozen river, Lydia cooked for him for the first time, a thick stew in a small metal pot. She stirred the ingredients slowly, determined to prove she wasn't a burden. Logan sat across from her, sharpening his knife, the rhythmic scraping blending with the hiss of the fire. She tasted the broth, hesitated, then offered him a bowl. He accepted it without hesitation. "That's good," he said simply after a long sip. A single, plain compliment. Yet her cheeks warmed under the cold air. Days turned into weeks. The mountains became familiar, the shape of the slopes, the sound of water moving under frozen layers, the cracking of distant ice signaling a change in weather. Logan's presence became a steady constant, his quiet manner a strange comfort. He rarely spoke, but when he did, every word felt deliberate. He pointed out animal tracks, showing her how to read the snow like a story. He taught her how to spot safe wood for burning, how to mend a weak part of the cabin roof, how to prepare strips of meat for winter storage. At night, the cabin glowed with firelight while the blizzard sang outside. Lydia would mend torn gloves or fold blankets while Logan sat by the hearth, carving something from bone or wood. The silence between them was different from the silence she had grown up with. It didn't suffocate. It didn't judge. It held space gently, like a soft breath. Sometimes she caught him glancing at her, not with disgust or mockery, but with thoughtful calculation, as if she were a puzzle he was trying to understand without frightening it away. Once, during a night storm, the wind roared hard enough to shake the cabin. Logan noticed her trembling hands and moved without thinking. "You're safe," he said. "The cabin won't fall. I built it myself." "You built all this alone?" she asked. "Yes. And you live here? Alone?" He nodded. "Why?" "Because people are louder than storms," he said simply. Lydia absorbed his words, understanding them all too well. The next morning, the world glittered under new snow. Logan saddled the horses, packed supplies, and said, "We're going to check the northern traps." Lydia bundled herself in layers and followed. With every climb, every fire lit, every handful of snow brushed from her face, she felt something inside her shift. This land challenged her, pushed her, demanded more than she thought she had, and she met every challenge. Slowly, she began to feel capable, useful, not the burden her father had declared her to be. One evening, as they returned to camp under the pink-gold glow of a winter sunset, Logan glanced sideways at her. "You're stronger than you think," he said. Lydia's heart thudded painfully. "You really believe that?" "If I didn't, you wouldn't be here." The words were not meant as affection, but to Lydia they were the first seeds of hope. The deeper winter pressed in, sealing the Wind River Range under a fortress of white. Yet inside Logan Frost's cabin, life found a steady rhythm, one built on routine, quiet gestures, and the warmth of a fire that never fully died. Lydia had never known a real home. She had known roofs, walls, structures, but never a place that welcomed her presence rather than merely tolerated it. Logan's cabin was small and rough, its logs weathered, its floorboards creaking in protest with every step. But the more days she lived there, the more it grew into something she didn't dare name. Each morning began the same way. The smell of smoke, the hiss of the fire as Logan added new logs, and the faint clatter of metal as he checked traps or sharpened tools. Lydia often woke before him now, quietly slipping out of her narrow bed to begin her own tasks. She swept the floor first, pushing away pine needles, loose snow, and stray dirt tracked in from their treks. She washed dishes from the night before, hung damp clothes near the fire to dry, and warmed water for tea. Logan never commented on her work, but he noticed. She saw it in the way he paused an extra second near the stove, or in the faint nod he gave when he found everything in order. One particular morning, she was stirring a pot of porridge when Logan stepped inside from the biting cold. He removed his gloves with stiff fingers, then set a small sack on the table. "You've been wanting sugar," he said. Lydia blinked. Yes, but how did you? You look disappointed every time you taste the porridge." His tone was matter-of-fact. "So I went down the ridge yesterday. That's a 3-hour climb. And?" He shrugged as if risking frostbite for sugar was ordinary. Lydia didn't reply. Words tangled in her chest, warm and aching. Later, after breakfast, Logan carried his axe outside to chop wood. Lydia stepped out to shake blankets and was caught off guard by the sight of him in the clearing. His axe rose and fell in harsh, steady movements, snow spraying with each strike. His breath fogged around him like smoke, his strength so effortless it made her heart stutter. Half an hour later, he paused and glanced at her. "Cold?" "No," she answered truthfully. "Not anymore." He studied her a moment, something unreadable in his eyes, before returning to his work. Inside the cabin, the space slowly changed because of her hands. She sewed new curtains from old fabric scraps Dutch had thrown away. Logan didn't comment when she hung them, but that evening she caught him looking at them twice, his expression softer in the lamplight. She repaired the torn quilt on his loft bed, careful to fold it back exactly as he had left it. 2 days later, she found a fresh rabbit hide on her chair, cleaned, stretched, ready for use. "Yours," he said without looking up from his workbench. "Why?" "You fixed my blanket." It wasn't gratitude spoken aloud, but it was gratitude. By midwinter, they worked as an unspoken team. Logan handled the hunting, the heavy lifting, the outside dangers. Lydia kept them fed, warm, and alive through careful planning. She learned to stretch ingredients across weeks, mastered the art of preserving meat over the fire, and even ventured to mend one of Logan's thick coats. One evening, as she sat stitching under the lamp, Logan approached quietly. "Let me see." She held up the coat, expecting criticism. Instead, Logan lifted the seam with his scarred fingers and nodded. "Good work?" Her chest tightened. "Thank you." He hesitated, then added, "Better than I could have done." The compliment stunned her. Logan Frost was not a man who offered praise lightly, or often. That same night, the wind roared outside, rattling the shutters. Lydia shivered as she checked the latch on her bedroom window. The cold seemed to howl with teeth, clawing at the cabin walls. Logan noticed. "You scared of storms?" he asked. "I'm scared of a lot of things." He considered her answer, then crossed the room and stoked the fire higher, adding an extra log. The flames flared warm and gold, filling the cabin with light. "You're safe here," he said. The words were low, gruff, but steady. She believed them. Slowly, the cabin became more than a shelter. It became the first place Lydia ever allowed herself to relax, even laugh. Once, while preparing stew, she spilled a spoonful onto the floor. She gasped and bent down to clean it, heart pounding in fear of reprimand. Logan spoke without glancing up from his trap repairs. "If stew on the floor is the worst thing that happens today, we'll survive just fine." Lydia froze. Her father would have screamed, cursed, thrown things. Logan's voice was almost amused. She straightened, eyebrows lifted. "You're in a good mood." "I'm alive," he replied simply. "Good enough." She surprised herself by smiling, and even more surprising, Logan's lips tugged into what might have been the ghost of a smile. Days blurred into a comfortable rhythm. Nights brought quiet conversation by the fire, nothing deep, just small pieces of truth traded slowly, cautiously. She learned he'd been a soldier once. He learned she loved books, but had never been allowed to own one. She learned he feared losing people more than he feared the mountains. He learned she carried shame like a cloak she'd never chosen to wear. One night, while Lydia laid out 2 bowls of soup, Logan placed something on the table, a small carving of a pine tree, smooth and polished. "You carved this?" she asked softly. "For you?" "Why?" He didn't meet her eyes. "Seems you like trees." She stared, moved beyond words. He had watched her stop on their walks to admire the pines, had noticed the quiet fascination she tried to hide. She touched the carving gently. "Thank you. It's beautiful." Logan cleared his throat, awkward. "It's just wood." "No," she whispered, "it's more than that." A beam of warmth tightened between them, fragile but undeniable. Lydia had never expected affection, never expected gentleness. But Logan's care came in small, rough-hewn pieces, like gifts shaped from the wilderness itself. The cabin, once foreign and cold, had grown warm with their shared presence. Each day Lydia felt her heart settle a little deeper into this strange, wild life. Each night, Logan's silence held less distance, and though neither spoke it aloud, something new had begun to bloom between them, slowly, cautiously, like a seed buried beneath winter snow, waiting for spring. By late winter, the mountains had grown deceptively quiet. Days passed with soft snowfall and windless mornings, as if the world were holding its breath. Lydia had grown comfortable in the cabin's rhythm. Too comfortable, perhaps, because safety can lull the heart into forgetting that danger never truly disappears in the frontier. One evening, as Lydia prepared supper, Logan returned from the northern trap line with a stiffness in his shoulders she hadn't seen before. Snow clung to his beard, but his eyes were darker than usual, shadowed, alert. "Something happened," Lydia said. Logan removed his coat, hung it by the door, and finally spoke. "Tracks. Human ones. Fresh. Someone's been near our ridge." Her chest tightened. "A traveler?" "No." Logan shook his head. "Too deliberate. Coming from the east. Stopping within sight of the cabin, then leaving again." "Who would—" "Someone looking for us." His jaw clenched. "Or for you." Lydia felt the cold sink into her bones, deeper than the winter air could reach. "My father signed those papers. He gave me to you. Why would anyone come after me now?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I don't like it." He didn't sleep much that night. Lydia heard him moving quietly, checking the windows, reinforcing the shutters, stoking the fire so it masked their silhouettes. Every time he passed her room, she felt a strange mixture of fear and gratitude. Logan was protecting her, fiercely, instinctively. The next morning, Logan set out again, but not alone. "You're coming with me," he said as Lydia tied her boots. "I don't want you here by yourself." They moved through the forest with quiet steps. The trees loomed tall around them, branches heavy with snow. Logan checked every ridge and ravine, studying the ground like it held answers. Lydia followed close, her breath visible in the icy air. Near a frozen creek bed, Logan halted. Lydia nearly bumped into him. "What is it?" she whispered. Logan crouched. In the snow lay another set of footprints, deeper, clearer, and beside them Lydia saw a familiar detail, the imprint of a walking stick with a chipped metal cap. She froze. "No, that can't be." Logan's expression hardened. "Dutch. Dutch was here? And he wasn't alone, Logan said, pointing to heavier boot marks beside them. 2 men, one with a limp. That's Holloway's gate. A chill deeper than any winter wind swept through Lydia. Why would they come all the way out here? To finish a deal your father couldn't manage, Logan said grimly, or to demand payment. Holloway doesn't take kindly to losing what he thinks he's owed. He thinks he was owed me, Lydia whispered, horrified. Yes, Logan said, and that makes him dangerous. They returned to the cabin with a new urgency. Lydia cooked while Logan prepared weapons, oiling his rifle, sharpening his hunting knife, stringing a bow made from mountain ash. I don't want violence, Lydia murmured as she set a bowl before him. I don't either, Logan replied, but I won't let anyone take you. Her breath caught. It was the closest he had come to admitting she mattered. But the conflict brewing outside was not the only one stirring inside the cabin. That night, the fire burned low as Lydia mended a tear in her dress. Logan sat nearby, arms folded, gaze distant. You never told me about your sister, Lydia said softly. Logan stiffened. That's because it's not a story I like telling. But it matters, Lydia said, because you saw me. You understood what my father did. You wouldn't have helped me if you hadn't lived something similar. The muscles in Logan's jaw tightened. Margaret was 18, sweet, kind, too gentle for this world. My father blamed her for everything, said she ate too much, cost too much, slowed us down. One day he sent her off with a mining crew, told everyone she wanted to work. A long silence. Lydia waited. Logan's voice finally broke, cracking in the middle. She didn't want to go, and those men, worked her until she collapsed. By the time I found the camp, she'd been buried 3 days. Lydia's needle froze mid-stitch. Logan, I wasn't there for her, he said. I should have stopped it. You were a boy. You couldn't have saved her. I should have tried, he growled. So when I heard your father talking like mine, I couldn't let it happen again. His confession hung heavy in the cabin, raw and unpolished. Lydia reached out, hesitated, then rested her hand on his forearm. His muscles tensed at the contact, but he didn't pull away. You saved me, she said, and not because I reminded you of her, because you knew it was wrong. Logan looked at her, then really looked, and something unguarded flickered in his amber eyes. Before either could speak further, a dog barked in the distance. 1 bark, then 2, then silence. Logan was on his feet instantly. That's Holloway's signal dog. Lydia's heart hammered. They're close? Close enough that the wind carried the sound. He grabbed his rifle and positioned himself near the window. Snow fell softly outside, masking the world in a deceptive calm. Lydia! His voice was steady but urgent. If they come here, you stay behind me, no matter what. She swallowed. I won't let them take me. Good. His stare was firm. I need you strong. They waited as the storm thickened outside, the fire crackling low between them. Lydia could hear her own heartbeat, loud in the stillness. Logan didn't speak again, but he moved closer until his knee brushed hers. A silent promise, a wordless shield. Whatever approached the cabin, Dutch's greed, Holloway's cruelty, the ghosts of their pasts, they would face it together. Snow fell in heavy, deliberate sheets, muffling the world into a cold, white hush. The fire crackled softly, but the warmth it offered felt fragile against the storm gathering outside. Lydia sat rigid on the edge of the chair, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached. Logan knelt by the window, rifle balanced in his steady hands, eyes scanning the dark ridge. Then footsteps, slow, heavy, distinct, not the uncertain tread of travelers, the confident, predatory approach of men who believed the world owed them something. Lydia's breath turned to ice. A moment later, a fist pounded on the cabin door so hard the wood shook on its hinges. "Frost!" a voice boomed, coarse as gravel. "Open up!" Logan didn't move from the window. "Holloway!" The second voice oozed greed. "And Dutch! We know you're in there." Lydia's pulse slammed against her throat. Holloway shouted again, "You got something that belongs to us." Logan stood at last, slowly, deliberately, like a bear rising to its full height. He placed himself between Lydia and the door. His voice carried the quiet threat of a storm about to break. "She belongs to nobody." Dutch snorted through the wood. "You think you can just take her without the arrangement being settled? Samuel promised her $50. Holloway already counted her as stock." Lydia closed her eyes in disgust. Stock. Like an animal. Logan calmly lifted the latch on the door, not to open it, but so the wood wouldn't splinter when struck. Then he spoke with icy precision. "She was never yours. Samuel had no right. And even if he did, I'm saying no." Holloway barked out a dangerous laugh. "You saying no to me never goes well." "Try opening that door," Logan said. "See what happens." A silence followed, a long, ugly pause thick with calculation. Lydia heard shifting footsteps, the creak of snow under weight, the soft click of a revolver being drawn. Dutch sneered from outside. "Listen, Frost, $50 and we leave in peace. She's worth more to us than to you anyway." Logan let out a slow breath, steady as winter. "You two need to turn around and walk off my land." Holloway's voice hardened. "Or what?" Logan raised his rifle, eyes sharp amber. "Or I show you what happened to the last man who thought he could take something from me." Dutch cursed. "You wouldn't dare—" A heartbeat later, a shot split the night. Logan hadn't fired. Holloway had. The bullet slammed into the doorframe inches from Logan's shoulder. Lydia cried out, hands flying to her mouth. Snow exploded outside. Boots thundered toward the entrance. Logan's voice dropped to a low command. "Lydia, back of the room, now." She obeyed, trembling, but she didn't hide. She refused to shrink into the small girl her father had demanded she be. She stood tall, breathing hard, ready to face whatever came. Holloway rammed the door. Logan moved like a force of nature. He swung the door fully open, catching Holloway off balance, and struck him with the butt of his rifle. The man crashed into the snow, cursing. Dutch scrambled back, tripping over his own feet. "You're insane!" Logan stepped into the doorway, towering above them, snow swirling around him like smoke around a fire. "Last warning." Holloway spat blood. "She's ours." "No," Lydia said suddenly. Her voice was clear, strong. She moved beside Logan, not behind him. "I'm not property," she said. "I'm not for sale, and I'm not going with you." Dutch scoffed. "You? You're nothing but—" Logan's rifle snapped up before Dutch finished the insult. "One more word," Logan said, "and I'll bury you under this snow before sunrise." Holloway's eyes shifted, calculating the angle, the distance, the odds. Logan saw the flicker of decision a moment before the man lunged. Logan fired into the snow at Holloway's feet, close enough to scorch the leather of his boot. The man froze. "This isn't over," Holloway hissed. "It is for tonight," Logan said. Dutch grabbed Holloway's arm, dragging him back. "Leave it. Not worth dying for." They stumbled into the storm, swallowed quickly by white wind and darkness. Logan closed the door, bolted it, and exhaled a long, shaking breath. Lydia stepped closer. "Are you hurt?" "No," he said, but his voice held something raw, fear, not for himself, but for her. "They won't stop. They'll try again." Lydia reached for his hand. "Then we face them. Together." He didn't pull away, and for the first time, Logan Frost allowed himself a truth he had tried to bury. He could lose everything else in this world, but not her. The storm raged long into the night, wind battering the cabin walls like a living thing determined to claw its way inside. Lydia sat close to the fire, but the true warmth came from Logan's presence beside her. Silent, steady, protective as the mountains that shaped him. Outside, the world was all white fury. Inside, only the low crackle of burning pine separated them from the wild. Logan checked the door once more, then returned to the hearth. Snow clung to his boots, melting quietly onto the floorboards. His face was unreadable, but tension pulled tight across his shoulders like stretched rope. "They'll regroup," he said, "when the weather clears." Lydia nodded. "I know." "You're not safe here anymore," he added. "Not as long as Holloway wants something he thinks he's owed." Lydia turned toward him. "Where would we go? Your life is here. Mine started here." He stared into the flames for a long moment. "I've lived in these mountains alone for years. No one depended on me, no one to lose. If I leave all this behind now—" His voice trailed off, gruff with unspoken fear. "I don't know what I'd be." "You'd still be Logan," Lydia said softly. "The man who saved me, the man who taught me to survive, the man who gave me worth when no one else saw it." The fire popped, sending sparks upward. Logan's hands tightened around the mug he held, knuckles pale. "You don't understand," he murmured. "I never wanted to care about anyone again, not after Margaret. It's easier to live without attachments. Safer." "Safer," Lydia agreed, "but not living." He finally looked at her, really looked. The guarded amber softened, shadows shifting into something rawer, something vulnerable beneath all the armor he wore. "You're not afraid," he said quietly. "I am," Lydia confessed. "But fear doesn't decide who I am. Not anymore." Logan exhaled, long and rough. He seemed to battle something inside himself. Doubt, guilt, maybe the belief that he didn't deserve anything more than solitude. Then he placed his massive hand over hers. The cabin went still. "You're safe here," he said. Lydia's breath trembled. "Am I?" His thumb brushed the back of her hand, brief but deliberate. "As long as I'm breathing." Warmth filled her chest, bright and steady. Outside, the storm carried on, uncaring, unstoppable. But inside this small cabin, the world had narrowed to two people and a fire they kept alive together. She leaned closer. "And what now?" Logan looked toward the snow-thick window, then back to her. "Now, we wait. We stay in the light. We plan for what's coming. You don't have to face it alone." A beat of silence. "Neither do I." Hope, quiet, unfamiliar but strong, rose inside her. The fire's glow flickered across their faces, catching the promise buried in Logan's quiet words. A home, a chance, a future carved from hardship and choice. The storm outside eased slightly, wind softening into a restless whisper. "Do you think," Lydia asked softly, "that love like this can survive everything waiting beyond these walls?" Logan didn't answer immediately. He simply drew her a little closer, his breath warm against her hair. "We'll find out," he murmured. "And we'll face it," Lydia finished, "together." Thank you for staying with this story until the end. Every time I read your comments, I'm reminded how stories can pull strangers together across countries, cultures, and distances. If this tale touched you in any way, let me know. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Your words inspire the next story, the next heartbeat behind every character. And if you still believe in love, in second chances, in the strength of unlikely hearts, don't go anywhere. The next story is already waiting for you. Push the obese woman off cliff. Gold prospector's murder plan. Mountain man's brutal justice. Then we throw the fat woman over. Dutch Keller said it like he was talking about a broken shovel, not a human being. His voice carried in the thin mountain air, sliding between the pines and drifting straight to where Clara Whitfield knelt beside the campfire, her hands buried in soapy water and ash. 6 weeks in the Sierra Nevada, and the gold fever that had once made these men laugh and sing now made them mean. 12 had started from Sacramento, 10 hard-eyed prospectors, Marcus Brennan's young, pretty wife, and Clara, 34 years old, 320 pounds, hired as the camp cook and promised an equal share in whatever fortune they dug from the earth. Equal, Marcus had said, gripping her hand in Sacramento. Valuable, he'd called her. Now his voice came from behind the remaining wagon, quieter than Dutch's, but twice as sharp. "What do you mean, throw her over?" "You heard me," Dutch replied. "That pass ahead is murder on the wagons. We've already lost one axle. If we haul her weight and all this gear up there, we snap another. We don't make it to the claim. We starve." There was a pause. The fire popped. Clara's hands froze in the cold water. "So what?" Pete Carson chimed in, young and eager, always first to cruelty. "We just leave her behind." "We make it look like an accident," Dutch said. "You remember that cliff we passed 2 miles back? She goes up there for firewood, slips, falls, tragic, unavoidable. We say a few words, bury what's left if we can reach it, and move on with lighter loads and more food for the rest of us." Clara pressed her lips together, breath shallow. "That's murder," old Tom Billings muttered, but there was no real strength in it. "It's survival," Dutch snapped. "She eats as much as a working man and gives nothing we can't do ourselves. Marcus, you're the leader. Decide. The wagon doesn't make it over that pass with her still in it." Silence. Clara could hear Marcus Brennan breathing, could almost see him weighing her life against timber, iron, flour, salt pork, and a dream of a gold vein that probably didn't exist. "The fat woman goes," Marcus said at last, voice low and final. "Tomorrow morning, at first light. We'll tell her we need her to help scout for water near the edge. One push, and it's over." 10 men agreed to kill her. 10 men she had fed, patched, and warmed with stew on freezing nights. Clara rose slowly, moving away from camp as if she were only searching for more wood. Her heart hammered against her ribs, her vision blurring. She had no horse, no money, nowhere to run. In 3 weeks of brutal climbing, they hadn't seen another living soul, until the growl came, low, deep, close. She turned and saw the grizzly reared up on its hind legs, teeth bared, fury made flesh. Clara did the only thing she could. She ran. Branches whipped her face, rocks tore at her shoes, breath burned her lungs. Behind her, the bear roared, men shouted, rifles cracked, her foot caught on a root. She pitched forward, tumbled down a slope, and slammed into something that did not give, not rock, not tree, A man. He barely staggered. Clara looked up, dazed, into a face like weathered stone, 7 feet of buckskin and scars and dark, watchful eyes that missed nothing. The mountain man had arrived. If you're listening to this right now, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you hearing Clara's story from? Clara Whitfield had known humiliation all her life, but never had it tasted as sharp or cold as it did now, standing in the shadow of a man carved from the mountains themselves. Her breath shook as she tried to steady herself, still hearing Dutch Keller's words echoing through her skull like hammer blows. Throw her over. The fat woman goes. Cade Blackwood, because that was the name men whispered around mining camps when they thought death might be listening, stood perfectly still, his broad frame blocking out half the light filtering through the pines. His coat was patched buckskin, his boots old but sturdy, and his hat's brim shadowed a face built of hard edges and quiet judgment. "You ran from the bear," Cade said, studying her with unreadable eyes. "Yes," Clara gasped, still trembling. It chased me. I didn't know where I was going." "You ran toward me." Cade's gaze flicked over her face. "Lucky choice." Clara swallowed. I didn't know you were here." "Didn't have to. I heard the men, heard the bear, followed both." Clara stiffened. "You heard the men?" "All of it." Her chest tightened. Shame, fear, and disbelief tangled inside her. "Then you know they're trying to kill me?" Cade gave a short, almost imperceptible nod. "They're cowards. Scared men make dangerous plans." Clara's legs buckled slightly. She grabbed a tree for support. "I don't know what to do. I don't have a horse. I can't outrun them. If I go back, they'll kill me before dawn." Cade watched her without blinking. "You can't stay here either. Night's coming. Too many predators in this valley." "So what do I do?" Clara whispered. "You come with me." It wasn't said kindly, or gently, or warmly. It was said like an order, like a practical solution to an inconvenient problem. And yet something in her chest unclenched. Cade Blackwood didn't strike her as a man who offered help twice. "Can you walk?" he asked. "Yes." "Then walk." He turned and started toward the trees, expecting her to follow. But Clara hesitated, glancing back toward the camp in the distance, toward the flickering firelight that was no longer safety, but death, waiting with patient breath. She turned away from it and followed Cade into the darkening woods. As they walked, Clara felt the full weight of the past 6 weeks pressing down on her. She had joined the expedition with hope, real, fragile hope, that maybe she could rebuild her life after Samuel's death. Her husband's passing had left her with nothing but debts and silence, no children, no family, no home. Her size had made everything worse. No one hired heavy women unless the job was awful or menial. The prospecting party had been her one chance, the only offer she'd received in 2 months. Marcus Brennan had smiled warmly, sold her a dream of equal shares, of adventure, of financial rebirth. And she had believed him. For 6 weeks she cooked their meals, washed their sores, mended their clothes, endured their taunts and jokes and backhanded remarks. She carried more than her share, literally. Clara was strong, always had been. Her weight was more muscle than people noticed, layered under softness they mocked. But none of that mattered. In the mountains, fairness was the first thing to die. Ahead of her, Cade moved without sound, an impossible thing for a man his size. He was larger than any man she'd ever seen, but it wasn't just height. He carried the weight of solitude in the way he walked, in the way he scarcely looked back to see if she kept up. He didn't talk, didn't offer comfort, didn't slow down unless she stumbled. But he also did not leave her behind. That alone made him the kindest man she'd met in months. By the time the cabin appeared, a shadow against the slope of a granite ridge, Clara's lungs burned and her legs trembled. Cade pushed open the door, letting warm, firelit air spill into the cold dusk. Inside was simple. One room dominated by a stone hearth, a small table, a bunk against the far wall, shelves stacked with dried herbs, smoked meat, and supplies arranged with military precision. Cade jerked his head toward a corner. "Sit." Clara sat. He poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. "Drink. Slow." She drank. Slow. Cade returned to the fire and stirred the coals. After a moment, "Tell me your name." "Clara Whitfield." "Age?" 34. "Widow?" Her throat tightened. "Yes." "Good cook?" His bluntness startled her. Yes, very." "Good. I need one." Clara blinked. "You need a cook? And someone who can keep this place running while I'm hunting or guiding." Cade stood fully now, towering, the fire outlining the breadth of his shoulders. "You need shelter, food, a way to survive. I need competence. That's the exchange." Clara stared at him, heart pounding. "You're offering me a job?" "No." Cade's voice was cold, but not unkind. "I'm offering you survival." Her breath hitched. She hadn't expected kindness in the mountains. She hadn't expected anything. But as she looked at this silent, scarred man, she realized something she hadn't felt since Samuel died. She wasn't alone. The fire crackled, the wind murmured against the walls, and Clara let herself breathe again for the first time in days. Cade Blackwood didn't talk much. Clara learned that on their very first morning together. He rose before daylight, moving with the disciplined quiet of a soldier rather than the lumbering weight of a man his size. By the time Clara woke, he had already checked the traps, brought in firewood, boiled water, and laid out the supplies she'd need for breakfast. He didn't ask if she was warm enough, didn't comment on her first rough night in a stranger's cabin, didn't offer reassurance of any kind. Instead, he pointed at the counter and said, "Porridge, enough for 2. That was it. That was the entire conversation. Clara cooked, Cade ate. Then he stood, pulled on his coat, and opened the door. "Come." "Where?" Clara asked, startled. "You need to see the land if you're going to live here." And so began the first of many long days, trekking through steep passes and narrow ravines, learning trails, water sources, safe paths, and places never to step. Cade moved fast, but always paused just long enough for her to catch up. He never looked impatient, never mocked her slowness, never told her she was too heavy or too weak. He simply adjusted the pace without comment. It was more kindness than she'd seen in months. Their days followed a rhythm: walk, learn, work, return. And as strange as it seemed, Clara found the silence between them far more comforting than the constant insults she'd endured with the prospectors. On the 4th day, they reached a narrow gorge filled with rushing snowmelt. Cade crossed easily on a fallen pine worn smooth by weather. Clara hesitated. The tree was slippery. The drop was deadly. "You're afraid," Cade said, watching her. "Yes," Clara admitted. "Good." He held out a hand, not to help her balance, but to steady her if she slipped. "Fear keeps you alive. Cross anyway." She took a breath, stepped onto the log, one foot after the other. Her heart hammered. The cold wind cut across her cheeks. Midway, Her foot slid, and she pitched sideways with a gasp. Cade's hand was there instantly, solid, unyielding, catching her arm before she fell. "Again," he said. She blinked. "Again? You don't learn by doing something once." Clara swallowed hard and crossed back. Cade followed her without touching the log with his hands, keeping pace just behind her, silent but present. 10 crossings later, exhaustion burned her legs and shoulders, but she made it across without slipping. Cade nodded once, a rare gesture of approval. "Good, you're not helpless." It was the first compliment she'd heard in a year. Clara felt her throat tighten. "Thank you," he shrugged. "Truth doesn't need thanks." But truth, Clara thought, was something she hadn't been given in a very long time. That night, after she cooked rabbit stew and baked cornbread from Cade's meager flour stores, he sat across from her, eating with the silent satisfaction of a man who hadn't had a decent meal in years. When he finished, he set his bowl aside and looked at her with those dark whiskey eyes. "You almost died with those men." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Clara said. "They were going to push me off a cliff tomorrow." "You should have heard that sooner," Cade replied. "Left sooner." "I couldn't," Clara said softly. "I had nowhere to go." "You do now." The words hit harder than she expected. Cade wasn't a man of comfort. He wasn't a man of smiles, but he was a man of blunt truth. And the truth was this: she had a place here, at least for now. She didn't know why that mattered so much, but it did. Over the next weeks, the valley became its own kind of school. Cade taught her to split wood without wrenching her back, to identify edible roots, to set snares, to snow-proof the cabin, to oil the hinges so the door sealed tight against night predators. Clara learned the smell of storms hours before they arrived, learned how to ration smoked elk, learned why Cade always checked the perimeter before sleeping, not because of fear, because of loss. Clara began to see pieces of the man underneath the coldness. He spoke little, but when he did, truth slipped out like sparks from a struck flint. "Don't stack firewood like that. It falls when the snow melts." "That cut will fester if you don't wash it." "You're breathing too shallow on the climb. Deep breaths keep your legs from burning." "Your step is heavier than it needs to be. Walk quiet. Bears hear everything." These were not the words of a man indifferent to her welfare. These were the words of a man who noticed everything, and yet something else grew in the spaces between them. Not warmth, not yet, but presence, shared work, a strange, steady companionship forged in silence and necessity. One night, as Clara stirred stew over the fire, Cade returned from checking the traps, snow dusting his coat. "Tomorrow," he said, unbuckling his knife, "we go to the high ridge." "What's there?" "Perspective," he said simply. "You need to see what your life looks like now." It wasn't until she stood on the ridge the next morning, with the valley stretching below like a hidden world and the mountain wind blowing through her hair, that she understood. This wasn't the end of her life. It was the beginning of something else, something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. Winter crept into the valley slowly, but once it settled, the world transformed into a white, silent wilderness. Snow layered the pines in heavy coats, the creek froze solid in places, and the mountains vanished behind veils of swirling frost. For Clara, the cabin became both sanctuary and crucible, warm, close, intimate in ways she had never experienced with another living soul. Cade Blackwood adapted to winter the same way the wolves did, effortlessly. He rose before dawn, returned after dark, and filled every hour between with relentless work. Cutting firewood, checking snares, butchering game, repairing the roof, clearing snow off the eaves before the weight collapsed the beams. His presence filled the cabin like a quiet, unyielding force. Clara filled the rest. She cooked whatever Cade brought home, rabbit, grouse, elk. She dried herbs she'd gathered in autumn. She cleaned, tended the fire, scrubbed every pot until it shone, not because she was expected to, but because the rhythm settled her heart. It felt good to be useful, good to see Cade eat food he didn't just tolerate, but genuinely enjoyed. One morning, as the storm outside raged with a fury that rattled the shutters, Clara heard Cade mutter a rare word. "Good." She looked up. "Good? You've portioned the flour right. We'll make it through until spring." Clara blinked. "You noticed that?" "I notice everything." His eyes lifted toward the shelves. "You've reorganized the stores. Smart. Less spoilage that way." A flush warmed Clara's chest, not embarrassment, but something gentler. Recognition, appreciation. She wasn't invisible here. She wasn't a burden. Cade saw her work, her effort, her value. "What about the cabin?" Clara asked. "Am I keeping it the way you like?" Cade glanced around the room. "You've kept it alive." Alive. The cabin, her work, the role she had built for herself here, it was more praise than she had received in years. Over time, small, startling changes began to unfold. Cade, who rarely asked for anything, began to ask, "Could you steep some pine needle tea? Helps against the cold." "Will you check the windows? Your hands are gentler with the latches." "Stay inside today. Storm's too strong. I don't want you slipping." "I don't want you slipping." It was subtle, almost careless, but Clara heard the quiet concern tucked inside. Even more surprising were the times Cade quietly made room for her. One night, heavy snow piled against the walls. Cade returned from the storm soaked and shivering. Clara rushed to hand him a blanket, but he waved her off and began removing his boots. "Sit," she said. He looked at her with that unreadable stare. "I'm fine." "You're frozen. Sit." To her shock, he obeyed. Cade, who hadn't bowed to 10 armed prospectors, sat because Clara told him to. She knelt to check his boots, searching for frostbite. "You walk too long," she murmured. "Your feet are numb. They'll warm." "You're reckless," she scolded without thought. Cade blinked down at her. "No one's spoken to me like that in years." "Like what?" "Like you expect me to live." Something inside Clara cracked open a little at that. She didn't know how it happened the first time. Maybe the isolation softened them. Maybe trust grew roots stronger than either realized. Or maybe two lonely, wounded people simply gravitated toward one another the way bodies sought warmth in winter. Whatever the reason, things shifted. Cade's actions, always blunt, became unexpectedly gentle. When Clara struggled to haul a water bucket, Cade took it without comment and said, "I reinforced the handle. It shouldn't dig into your hands now." When she burned her finger stirring stew, Cade stood beside her, washed the wound, wrapped it with precise, careful movements. "You have to be careful," he said. "I am careful. Be more careful," he muttered, which Clara recognized as worry disguised as irritation. And Clara changed too. Her body, once only the subject of ridicule, became a source of quiet pride here. Cade gave her work that required strength, splitting logs, moving heavy pots, hauling gear, and each time she succeeded, Cade gave a small nod of approval as though he had expected no less. "You're stronger than you think," he said once, handing her another piece of firewood. "I've always been strong," Clara replied softly. "People just didn't want to see it." "I see it." The words struck deeper than he could have known. As days blurred into nights, Clara found herself anticipating Cade's footsteps outside, listening for the familiar crunch of snow. She watched him repair the roof, his breath white in the cold air, his muscles shifting beneath his coat. Sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, he glanced through the window toward her, quick, almost guilty glances, like a man who didn't want to be caught wanting anything at all. One evening, during the coldest week of winter, Clara sat at the table mending one of Cade's shirts. She'd sewn the tear carefully, knotting the thread with practiced fingers. When Cade entered the cabin, brushing snow from his coat, she held it out to him. "I fixed it." He took the shirt, examining the seam. "Good work." Then, to her surprise, he stripped off the shirt he was wearing, slow, unapologetic, unthinking. Clara's breath caught. His chest was broad, defined, scarred in places old and new. A man built by labor and survival. Their eyes met. Cade froze. Clara looked down. "Sorry, I didn't mean to stare." "You can stare," he said. Her head snapped up. Cade cleared his throat, clearly regretting the impulsive honesty. "I mean, it doesn't bother me." The silence stretched thick and warm between them. Then Cade muttered, "You're good company." It was the closest he had ever come to admitting affection. Later that night, as Clara set a blanket on her bed, Cade lingered at the doorway of her small room. "You sleep well?" he asked. "Yes." "You feel safe?" Clara swallowed. "Yes, with you I do." Cade's jaw worked as though he was holding something back. Then he simply said, "Good. That matters." He closed the door gently, so gently Clara knew it was deliberate. She lay awake long after, staring at the ceiling, feeling warmth spread through her chest in a way that had nothing to do with the fire. Something was changing, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. Winter eventually loosened its grip on the valley. Snow melted into rushing streams, the earth softened, and the first green shoots pushed through the thawing ground. With spring came movement, animals waking, rivers swelling, the sounds of life filling the quiet places between the trees. But something else awakened too, tension. It began quietly, like the low growl of a storm building behind distant peaks. One morning, as Clara and Cade worked side by side repairing the fence around the smokehouse, they found tracks. Boot prints, not animal. Fresh, heavy, too close to the cabin for coincidence. Cade crouched, one hand brushing the disturbed earth. 3 men, maybe 4? Clara felt her stomach twist. "Do you think it's them?" Cade didn't answer immediately. He stood slowly, eyes scanning the tree line, shoulders tight with instinctive readiness. The prospectors didn't go back to Sacramento like they promised. Men like that rarely accept being told what to do. "You think they're coming for me?" Clara whispered. Cade turned to her with a look she had seen only once before, the night he saved her life, a look of absolute, dangerous resolve. "They won't touch you," he said, "not while I'm breathing." That should have comforted her. Instead, it frightened her in a new way. She wasn't worried for herself now. She was worried for him. Cade Blackwood was powerful, skilled, experienced. But even he had limits, and 10 men with a grudge were not the kind who fought fair. Over the next days, Cade's routines changed subtly. He left the cabin less often, checked the perimeter more, sharpened his knives, and oiled his rifle with a diligence that bordered on ritual. At night, Clara heard him moving quietly through the cabin, checking locks, scanning shadows outside the window. He didn't hide his worry, but he didn't voice it either. Cade wasn't a man of words. Still, Clara felt the tension in every breath. She also felt something else, something he was hiding. One evening, as they sat near the fire, Clara noticed a letter tucked into the edge of Cade's pack. A letter she hadn't seen before, sealed with a mark she didn't recognize. Cade noticed her looking and folded the flap down immediately. "What's that?" she asked. "Nothing," Cade said. Clara stared at him. "It didn't look like nothing. It's personal. You don't want to tell me." "Not yet." Clara set aside her mending, frustration prickling her skin. "Do you think I can't handle the truth?" Cade's jaw tightened. He stared at the flames for a long moment before answering. "The truth isn't the problem." "Then what is?" "You." Her breath caught. "Me?" "I don't want to hurt you," Cade said quietly. Clara's chest tightened. "Hurt me how?" Cade didn't speak, but his silence was heavy, too heavy. Clara's voice trembled. "Cade, if you care about me, if you trust me even a little, then tell me, please." His head bowed slightly. A long breath left his chest. "The letter is from the territorial marshal," he said. "He wants me to guide a detachment north next month through hostile territory. Dangerous work." Clara blinked. "So you'd be gone?" "Yes." "For how long?" "A month, maybe longer." The words struck like a blow she hadn't expected until this moment. "You weren't going to tell me," Clara whispered. "I didn't want you worrying," Cade said. "And I didn't want you thinking I'd leave you unprotected. If I go, I'll reinforce the cabin, leave traps on the ridge. You'll have enough food." "Cade," Clara said softly, "that's not what I mean." He went still. She swallowed. "I don't want to be alone. Not after everything. I don't want you gone." His eyes flicked toward her, dark and conflicted. "Clara," he said, voice low, "this is who I am. I guide the marshal. I know these mountains better than any man alive. It's work that saves lives. Work I owe to people who don't know how to survive out here." "You owe the world everything," Clara murmured. "But what do you owe yourself?" The question hit him harder than she expected. He looked almost startled. Cade Blackwood, who had survived raids, war, blizzards, and heartbreak, looked suddenly unsteady. Clara reached out and touched his wrist, not confidently, but gently. He didn't pull away. "Tell me honestly," Clara whispered, "do you want to go?" Cade hesitated. "I don't know." "That's not the truth." He exhaled sharply. "The truth is, the thought of leaving you hurts. More than I expected." The admission was so raw, so unguarded, Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. But the moment shattered when a sound echoed from outside, a crack of a branch snapping under heavy weight. Cade's head snapped up. "Inside, now!" Clara froze, but he was on his feet already, grabbing his rifle, moving with silent, deadly purpose. He crossed to the window, peering out without exposing himself. 3 shadows moved between the trees. Cade muttered a curse. "They're here." Clara's throat closed. "What do we do?" Cade stepped toward her, gripping her shoulders. His voice was low but steady. "You stay behind me. You don't speak unless I tell you. And no matter what happens, you don't run. If they get you in the open, I can't protect you." She nodded, though her knees trembled. Cade brushed a thumb across her cheek in a gesture so brief she questioned whether she imagined it. Then he stepped in front of her, positioning himself between her and the door. "Stay close," he said. The knock came, heavy, threatening. Then a voice she knew, dripping with rage. "Cade Blackwood, we know she's in there. Hand over the fat woman." Cade didn't open the door. He didn't flinch. He just raised his rifle, aimed at the wood, and said, "She's not the one you should be afraid of." The knocking grew harder, fists slamming into the wood with a fury meant to intimidate. Clara felt each blow in her spine, like the cabin itself was flinching. Cade didn't move. He stood in front of her, body angled toward the door, rifle steady in his hands. Outside, Dutch Keller's voice rose like a snake, uncoiling. "Cade Blackwood, open up! We're taking what's ours." Cade's reply was calm, low, almost bored. "Nothing and no one here belongs to you." "Move aside," another man snarled. "We ain't scared of your mountain tricks." Cade took one step forward, the floorboards creaking under his weight. "You should be." Silence followed, thick and uneasy. Cade cracked the door open just an inch, keeping his rifle ready. Clara peered through the gap behind his shoulder. Dutch Keller stood there, face gaunt with rage, 3 other men flanking him like wolves starved too long. When Dutch spoke again, spittle flew. "Move, we're taking the woman. And if you stand in our way—" "You'll what?" Cade asked. It wasn't a challenge, it was an invitation. Dutch shifted, confidence wavering. "She belongs to us. She signed a contract." "No," Cade said. "She signed on for work, not death, not murder." His voice sharpened, a blade honed on grief and survival. "You planned to push her off a cliff. I heard you, every word." Dutch sneered. "We were doing what needed doing. She was eating too much, slowing us down." A sound came from Cade, not a growl, not a shout. Something quiet, dangerous, threaded with old hurt. "You speak about her again with that mouth," Cade murmured, "and I'll remove it from your face." Dutch swallowed. The others shifted nervously. Clara touched Cade's back. He didn't turn, but she felt the slightest tightening of his shoulders, the only sign he knew she was there. Her voice trembled, but she forced herself forward. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Dutch jerked his head toward her, lip curling. "You think he's going to keep you? Look at you. Big as a mule, useless. He's just pretending." Cade moved so fast Clara barely saw it. He flung the door wide, seized Dutch by the front of his coat, and hauled him off his feet like he weighed nothing at all. The other men scrambled back, hands going to their pistols, but Cade already had his rifle pressed to Dutch's forehead. "You pull those guns," Cade said coldly, "and Dutch dies before he hits the ground." Dutch trembled violently, breath coming in gasps. "You wouldn't—" one of the men stuttered. Cade didn't blink. "Try me." The standoff crackled like lightning. Clara could feel it in her teeth, in her bones, the violence hovering just above a single breath, a single twitch of a finger. And then Clara did the thing she least expected of herself. She stepped out onto the threshold beside Cade. "Stop," she said. Cade's head snapped toward her. "Clara—" "No." Her voice steadied. "This wasn't just about their cruelty. It was about me letting myself believe I was worth so little they could get away with it." Dutch barked a laugh, high, desperate. "You think you matter? You're nothing but—" "Shut up," Clara said. Dutch froze. Clara stepped closer, her voice thick but unshaking. "I cooked for you, mended your clothes, carried more than half the men on that expedition, and you decided I wasn't worth the space I took up." Cade's hand tightened around Dutch's collar. Clara lifted her chin. "I matter, I'm worth saving, and I'm not afraid of you anymore." Cade's eyes softened, barely, but enough. The men exchanged looks, uneasy now for a different reason. Dutch finally broke. "Fine, he spat. "Keep her. We're done. We just want to leave." Cade shoved him backward. Dutch stumbled into the snow, cursing, scrambling to his feet. The men didn't wait. They backed away quickly, then hurried down the trail, disappearing between the pines like shadows losing shape. Cade didn't move until the last echo of their footsteps faded. Only then did he lower his rifle. Only then did he shut the door. Only then did he turn to Clara. She expected anger, a lecture, frustration that she had stepped into danger. Instead, Cade cupped her face in both hands, his touch trembling. "You stood with me," he whispered. "I wasn't alone anymore," Clara replied. Cade's forehead touched hers, his breath unsteady. "I won't let anything take you from me. Not them, not this mountain, nothing." Clara closed her eyes. "I believe you." Night fell slowly over the mountains, laying soft shadows across the cabin walls. The confrontation was over, but Clara's heartbeat still thrummed in her chest like a drum. Cade moved through the room with slow, silent purpose, checking the shutters, stirring the fire, ensuring every trace of danger had disappeared into the dark. But when he finally sat beside her, the space between them felt charged, quiet, but full of something neither of them could ignore anymore. "Are you hurt?" Cade asked. His voice was low, but the roughness was gone, replaced by something almost gentle. "No," Clara said. "Not hurt." But her throat tightened. "Just tired." Cade looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out, not abruptly, not like the fierce man who'd held a gun to Dutch Keller's skull, but carefully, as if touching her required courage he wasn't sure he possessed. His fingers brushed her cheek. "You scared me today?" Clara blinked. "I scared you?" "You stepped outside, into danger, into their line of fire." His jaw flexed. "You could have been shot." "I had to," Clara whispered. "If I didn't speak for myself today, I'd never be free of them, or of what they made me believe." Cade's eyes, those dark, whiskey-deep eyes, softened in a way she'd never seen. "What did they make you believe?" "That I wasn't worth saving." Clara swallowed hard. "That I wasn't worth anything at all." The fire popped, sending golden sparks into the air. Cade leaned closer, voice low, steady, absolute. "They were wrong." Clara's breath hitched. "You matter," Cade said. "You're strong. You're steady. You work harder than any of them ever did. And you're worth more than you can possibly see." Clara's throat tightened painfully. "Cade, you think I let you stay because I needed a cook?" Cade shook his head. "I let you stay because the moment you fell into me on that trail, something inside me shifted. Like I hadn't been alive, not really, in years." He hesitated. "Maybe not since Sarah." Clara's breath caught at the name, but he didn't flinch. "I thought loving someone again would kill me," Cade admitted. "But losing you today, losing you would have killed me faster." Silence settled between them, not empty, but full, warm, fragile. Clara placed her hand over his. "Cade, I'm not Sarah. I won't replace her. I won't erase her. But I promise you this, I'll stay, as long as you want me." Cade cupped the back of her neck and pulled her gently toward him. Their foreheads touched, breath mingling, the fire's glow framing them in soft gold. "I want you," Cade whispered, "here, in my cabin, in my life. You're home now, Clara, if you'll have it." Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally belonging somewhere. "I'll have it," she said. "I'll have you." Cade kissed her, slow, reverent, like a man rediscovering warmth after years buried in cold stone. When they finally parted, the world outside seemed distant, almost unreal. Inside the cabin, everything was still, safe. The promise of a shared life settled around them like a blanket. Beyond the windows, the mountains remained wild and dangerous. But Clara had survived them. She had survived men who wished her dead. And she had found a place, found a man who saw her worth even when she could not. Thank you for listening to Clara and Cade's journey tonight. Their story reminds us that even in the harshest wilderness, whether it's a mountain trail or the loneliness we carry inside, there is always a chance to find someone who sees our worth long before we see it ourselves. Stories like this travel far, carried by every person who listens, comments, and shares a moment of their day with us. Tell me, where in the world are you listening from right now? And if you still believe that love can grow even in the coldest places, stay close. The next story is waiting for you.